Now, a double chessboard with 120-kilogram pieces. That's how rugby has been described by a leading performance analyst who says the game is very much about finding ways of being smarter than the opposition as anything else. At the French Parisian club Stade Français, one of the tools they've brought in this year is an Irishman. Capped 108 times for his national team, which he captained, and 7 times for the British and Irish Lions. Our guest today has been noted for his determination both on and off the pitch. His career as a player came to an abrupt end during a World Cup game against France in 2015, but he's now come over to try and get the French in line. Mr. Paul O'Connell, thanks so much for coming into studio to speak with us. Now, you've arrived in France just a few short months ago. You have already coached in Ireland. What's it like trying to get these French players into line? Is it very different?
It is a little bit different, yeah. I suppose the difference for me is I was at one club for a very long time. I was in one club for 14 years. A lot of players kind of move. They might end up in 2 or 3 different clubs. So you get a sample of how different people in different clubs do it. So I'm really coming from one way of doing things and trying to learn another way. So I'm trying to learn the French way. And also our head coach is South African as well. And we've other South Africans on the staff. So there's a South African way of doing things. And we're just trying to all assimilate and come together. So it's been a very interesting experience and a big learning curve.
An international group there, but there is more than one Munsterman because you're from the province of Munster in Ireland, and you know there's 2 Munster coaches at Stade Français, and on another French team, a competitor team, Racing, there's 2 Munster players. What is it that Munstermen have that others don't, and are you going to give some of those Irish secrets away in your coaching role?
I don't think there's any secrets. Certainly, I do think Irish teams, because we're generally smaller, we feel we have to be a little bit fitter than the opposition maybe, and because we're smaller, we feel we have to be a little bit smarter. And I think over the last few years they've proven that. I think a lot of it is in implementation. A lot of teams know exactly what they have to do. Trying to implement it when you have players who are playing in an 80-minute rugby match where they've scrums, line-outs, mauls, and they're under constant physical pressure and mental pressure. Trying to be smart in that environment is hard, and trying to coach players to be smart in that environment is hard as well. And that's what we're trying to do.
And actually, I'd like to look at that, all that mental and physical training, because in 2015, your on-the-pitch playing career in rugby came to a bit of an abrupt end here, playing against France due to an injury. Can you remind us exactly what happened and what it was like being pretty much on top form and suddenly being out of it?
Yeah, it was disappointing. I was 35 at the time. I'd had a lot of injuries earlier on in my career, so I honestly didn't think I'd play till I was 35. So I was delighted to get to that age, and I retired really with no regrets. It was a World Cup pool game against France. It was just before half-time. I got injured. I went off. We probably played better in the second half when I wasn't on the field, and we went on to beat France, which for me, growing up in the 1990s and the early 2000s, Ireland never really beat France. So to be part of a team that's kind of gone on a journey where now we're competitive with them, and we've had the upper hand on them in recent years has been a great experience. But yeah, so I retired at 35, and I always had an interest in coaching. I think it's incredibly hard work, very long hours. So I've dipped my toe in and out of it for a few years, and I got a call just before the summer then to see would I be interested in going to Stade, and now I'm dipping my toe in fully, I suppose, and immersing myself in it and seeing if it's something I really want to do.
And I guess getting that French experience, which is something you seem to have been working towards anyway. You were going to play for Toulon at one stage before that injury happened. Now, but you did, after you retired, you did write a book, The Battle, about your time as a player. And one thing that stands out, actually, which, when we look at rugby, we see the physical side of the game, but we don't so much think of the mental preparation. And what comes across is, for you, a lot of the time you had to stress yourself out. You saw that stress, negativity was nearly a motivation, the way to win.
Yeah, I think sometimes, and a lot of players, a lot of sports people do it, I probably made the game more important than it was really. I made it into life or death, and now that I'm retired and I'm out of the game and I have 3 kids, I see that it wasn't. But yeah, I definitely put too much pressure on myself. And the Friday before big games, very often I would be I'd almost be happy to get on a plane and leave the country rather than face the game I was about to play. But towards the end, I was very much on top of that. I had some great coaches. sports psychologist that worked with us down through the years, and I got my preparation better, and I began to enjoy it. Probably took a lot of the focus on winning out of my preparation, and put a lot of focus onto being as good as I can be with what I had. And when that, I suppose, shift in focus happened for me, I started to enjoy the game a lot more. I think I probably became a better leader and a better teammate. And yeah, I got a lot more satisfaction out of the game, and I started probably playing better as well. So I suppose that kind of chronicles that journey.
Which is something, I guess, in all aspects of life. That old adage that if you think successful, it can kind of breed success. But I guess what was hard for you is you were already doing pretty well. Now, one thing you mentioned is that when you were growing up, rugby wasn't even your first love. It was swimming, then golf. But one of the things you always looked at was the sportsmen that represented your country. They were your heroes. Now you've been one, so still your heroes?
Yeah, well, that's what I grew up with. I grew up in a sports mad house, and I just remember watching TV. My dad is big into sports, anything at all, and if we ever watched TV and there was an Irish guy playing in a soccer match, and it was, it might be the second division in England, it might be Portsmouth versus Derby or something, my dad would be shouting for Portsmouth if the left back was Irish. Or I remember watching the Ryder Cup whenever any of the Irish golfers were playing. We had some great athletes throughout the years, Sonia Sullivan. So anyone playing for Ireland was always a superstar, a superhero in my house. So,
and in houses across the country, I have to say, you can hear I'm Irish as well. And I mentioned there briefly that you had planned to move to Toulon. You've now taken on the move to France, and you've even got married in France, I believe, in the south of France.
Yeah.
What is it, the French attraction?
I don't know. I grew up going to an all-Irish primary school, so I spoke Irish when I was young. I would have been fluent at Irish. Obviously, we speak English as well in Ireland, but I would have done German and French, and I always enjoyed languages in school. So towards the end of my career, the opportunity came to go and play in Toulon and live in a really beautiful part of the world. And for me, one of the big attractions was to go there and learn the language. So that didn't happen, unfortunately, and I probably always had a bit of an itch to come back and try and coach and figure out if I want to coach, but also to learn the language. So, Paris, there's probably no better place to experience France, I suppose, and learn the language and coach than Paris.
Indeed. I won't disagree with you on the Paris side of things anyway. Paul O'Connell, thanks a lot for coming into the studio. It's been a pleasure to find out more about your move here to France.